Hello, everybody. Raven Knight here, and welcome back to our final installment in our series going through the life of Ruth. Go ahead and turn in your Bible to Ruth chapter 4. Today we are going to wrap up the story of Ruth, and I am incredibly excited to dig deeper once more into this incredibly beautiful story of grace, love, and redemption. I have had such a wonderful time going through this with you guys. I cannot wait to wrap this up, although I am a little bit sad about it because I've just had so much fun with this series. Like I said, Ruth chapter 4 is where we'll be, and I want to take a moment to explain an aspect of the story we haven't really dug that much into yet. It's an aspect of the story that was mentioned last time, and I touched on it, but I'd like to really explain what that is. It's called a kinsman redeemer or a family redeemer. What is that? If you guys remember last time we talked, we discussed how Ruth was asking Boaz to accept the role of family redeemer because he was related to Naomi's late husband, Elimelech. But what does that mean exactly? What does it mean to be a family redeemer? Well, first, you have to understand the serious issue facing Naomi and Ruth right now. You see, when God gave the promised land to the Israelites, this was not just a simple promise. The land they were given was meant to belong to them and their children for all time. So if there is no male heir to inherit the family land, then the land is lost. It becomes a legal and theological nightmare. So with Naomi and Ruth being husbandless and childless, who is this land going to go to? Who's going to take it? In Jewish law, there is a way to fix this situation. It's called a family redeemer. And here's how it works. Let's say that my little brother is living separate from me and he's married, right? And he has no child. Now, let's say that my brother dies suddenly. God forbid, but let's say that he dies suddenly and he has no children and he just leaves a wife behind. I would then take on the role of family redeemer. I would marry his widow, his wife, so that she could have a child through me, and that child would then become the heir to my brother's estate and land. So when the child comes of age, the land would then go to him because I was acting according to grace. That child will inherit what is rightfully his family's. I'm simply the redeemer who helped make it possible. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because it's complicated. It's Jewish law that we're dealing with here. It is complicated. But guys, by the time we're done today, you're going to see a parallel between Boaz and Ruth that will blow your mind inside and out. But we don't want to jump the gun just yet, do we? So let's walk through this piece by piece, starting with Ruth chapter 4. Let's dive into it. First verse, here we go. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so, but if you will not, tell me, so I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it," he said. Okay, so we got a couple things that we need to talk about here. A couple things, all right? Boaz, if you guys don't remember what happened last time, essentially, Ruth has been working for Boaz for a long time. But Naomi tells Ruth, this is great, but eventually I'm going to die and you're going to be left with nothing. It's time for me to give you a life, okay? It's time for me to give you some security. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to Boaz. You're going to wait until it's nighttime when he's going to bed in the threshing floor. You're going to lay at his feet. And when he wakes up and sees you, tell him that you want him to become your family redeemer. Ask him to put a piece of the cloth that he's sleeping under over you as a sign of servitude, and he will tell you what to do. So she does that, and Boaz is blown away by this, and he goes, "Oh, this is a greater kindness than you've ever shown before. This is incredible. Bless you, woman, because this is an incredible thing you've done. I will gladly be your family redeemer, but there's a problem. there's someone else who is closer related to Elimelech, Naomi's husband, than I am. Therefore, he gets first dibs on this. I'm going to deal with this. So here we see him dealing with it. But how he's dealing with it is interesting. He's gone to the middle of town and approached another relative, the closer relative, and he says, hey buddy, hey, let's sit down and talk. And then he gathers a bunch of elders, 10 elders and leaders, to act as witnesses. There is no backing out of this. Boaz is making sure that what he does here is open, official, and not underhanded. So this is an official purchase offer. Now, here's a funny story I want to share with you. I once heard a pastor go over this story, right, and try to claim that what Boaz did here was honest and honorable, while what Ruth proposed to him the night before was underhanded and calculated. And I find that a very poor read because of how Boaz words this. Notice how he front loads the proposal here. He starts with, okay, hey man, get this, all right? Naomi, you remember Naomi, right? Elimelech's widow? Yeah, we're related. Yeah, she came back from Moab, and she's going to be selling all of her land since she has no husband, sons, or heirs alive to inherit it. Now that is an incredibly clever front load, because notice what he leaves out. Notice what he does not mention. Who does he not bring up? Ruth. He front loads a lot of information there to make the deal look good. And why wouldn't it look good? If she sells this land to you, look at that. You get a lot of free land. Isn't that great? It would be, think of it like this. It would be like if you had an elderly aunt and she's about to pass away and she's going to give away her land to someone in her family and you're the first in line. What a steal. So the relative says, yeah, I'm in, I'll take it. But then watch our boy Boaz pull a fast one. So the relative has just said, yeah, I'll redeem it. But then Boaz said, oh, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself, I cannot do it. Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transaction in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed his sandal. Ooh, guys. Did you catch that? That was smooth. Did he? Boaz suddenly drops the coin. When the relative says, yeah, I'll take the land, Boaz probably got his big grin on his face and suddenly goes, that's great, man. Glad you're willing to redeem it. And of course, you'll be willing to marry Ruth too, right? You know, the Moabite woman, Naomi's daughter-in-law. Yeah, she'll need to marry you to have an heir. And once he heard that, never mind. Now, why did he back out like that? Why is that a problem? Simple. Because it complicates his own estate. See, if he was just getting the land, because here's the thing. Naomi's too old to have any more kids. He's not worried about moving in, taking the land, because he's not going to have any kids with Naomi. But he didn't know about Ruth. But if he marries Ruth and they have a child, that means eventually their child will get Naomi's land, not his own family. And that complicates things. He has to go through the process of getting married, having a kid, raising that kid, and then giving up this land to that kid. There is no fiscal benefit in it for him in the long term, and it only screws up his estate as it stands. So he backs down and declares, hey, you know what? I don't want this. Boaz, it's all yours. Here's the thing about being a family redeemer, guys. It is a noble, generous, righteous thing to do, but it is also a sacrificial thing to do. Remember the example I said about, let's say that my brother dies and he leaves behind a widow who has no child? If I were to marry his widow, have a child with his widow, that child would inherit what my brother owned. It would not be mine. it would be the child's. That's what being a guardian redeemer means. That's what being a family redeemer means. I'm basically making sure that my brother's estate and lands and title and heritage stays alive. It does not benefit me in the long term. It benefits my brother's family. And that's why this guy thought, oh, cool. So Naomi's going to give away her land. She's too old to have children. All I got to do is go in, be the redeemer, buy the land, give her money to live off of, and I get free land. Hoorah! But then Ruth is added to the mix, and he says, by the way, but if you do take the land, that means you get Ruth too. She's 100% young enough to marry, and she is young enough to have children. Ooh, no, not doing that. Now, why didn't he want to get with Ruth? Because, Ruth isn't bad looking. She's an attractive woman, I'm sure. She turned eyes, we know that much. Simple. He's probably married himself. Now, at this time period, it wasn't that big a deal to marry someone else, especially if you were a guardian redeemer. It wasn't seen as a bad thing, like you're already married, but you've got to become a guardian redeemer. That was pretty much understood culturally at the time. But he wanted to protect his land interest. He wanted to protect what was his. Now, it's a cool thing if you get this land, but eventually the child he has with Ruth is going to have to grow up and get that land themselves, and then he's going to have to give up this awesome land he was just making profit off of to this kid, and all the profit that land was getting was going to go to that kid. That's not a good look. Does that make sense? I know that seems rather confusing to a lot of people, and I understand it's not the way things work today, but in Jewish custom at the time, that was how it worked. Now listen to how Boaz responds when the other family redeemer says, no, you redeem it, you can have it. Picking up in verse 9. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses. Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the child gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Now, why is that significant? Simple. He got witnesses. He got witnesses. He wanted to make sure that everyone saw what he was doing. He wanted to make sure everyone saw this. Hey, can I get some witnesses here? I'm the guardian redeemer. You saw him deny it. You saw him give me the right. You saw him hand over his sandal. I'm the redeemer. There is no question about the legality of this. He's making sure everyone knows, the world knows, Ruth is mine to protect and take care of. Now let's take this a step further. Guys, do you notice a unique parallel here? The story of Ruth, at the end of it all, the story of Ruth is a story of God's grace and God's love. In fact, when I was talking to my friend Jay about it, he pointed out something incredible. And this may blow your mind too, like it did mine. The story of Ruth and Boaz is a reflection of the story of us and Jesus. Watch this. Elimelech did wrong by abandoning the land God had given him, and he took his family and settled in a land of pagans and sinners. There his sons married pagan women. He and his sons died there, and Naomi, with her daughter-in-law Ruth, returned to Israel with nothing. Absolutely nothing. Ruth and Naomi have no land to call their own, no heirs to inherit anything, no husbands to care for them, destined to die and fade away into obscurity. But then along comes Boaz, a righteous and upstanding man who, through his grace, through his compassion, and through his love, became the redeemer for Ruth. The book of Revelation describes the church as the bride of Christ. So if we think of Ruth as us, as the church, as the bride of Christ, and Boaz as Jesus, what better parallel could we draw than that? A woman who had nothing but her faith, trust, and devotion to the one person who could redeem her. And then the grace and love shown by that Redeemer to save her, though it cost him greatly to do so. The story of Ruth and Boaz is a story of the church being saved by Christ. Because like I said, being a family redeemer does not mean fiscal benefit for you in the long term. It is a sacrifice you have to make out of love and kindness and compassion. And Jesus made that sacrifice for us. And we're just like Ruth. We don't have any hope outside of Jesus. We're not going to inherit anything. We don't have anyone to take care of us outside of Jesus. There is no redemption for our sin and for our loss outside of Jesus. So we have to lay at his feet and say, Jesus, you are the only one who can be our salvation, the only one who can redeem us. What is Jesus' other name? The Great Redeemer. And Jesus said, I will be that Redeemer. And he made it known to the world. His sacrifice and resurrection are known to the world. And there are some who would try to deny it. But you cannot deny the many witnesses of Jesus who saw him ascend, who saw him on the cross before his ascension, who saw the many miracles he had done. It is written in Roman history that Jesus was sacrificed on a cross, was put in a tomb, and according to hundreds of eyewitnesses, he ascended into heaven. Just like Boaz got those witnesses to see what he had done for Ruth, there were witnesses throughout history who have seen the works and redemption of Jesus. Some people may look at the story of Ruth and just see a sweet love story, but the story of Ruth is a story of God's unbelievable and unstoppable grace. See, that's one of the things that I think so many people miss about Ruth. It's such a short book of the Bible that some people look at it and go, oh, well, cute Sunday school story. That's a cute little love story. Could probably make a Hallmark movie out of that. But that's all it is. No, guys. Ruth is so much more powerful than that. But you want to know the even crazier part? It gets even better. If you read further, we're going to go a little bit further down, picking up in verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age, for your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Let's walk through that bit by bit, shall we? So Boaz married Ruth. They had a son. And the women said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord for the man who is your Redeemer, and to your daughter-in-law who loved you and showed you compassion. She's better than 7 sons. And Naomi cared for the child like he was her own. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of David. Yeah, y'all know who that David is, right? King David. I said it before and you might have missed it, but I'm going to reiterate it here. Ruth and Boaz are the patrilineal grandparents of Jesse and the great-grandparents of David. Now, do you guys know what Jesus was also called? The Son of David. That's because Jesus' family line, his mortal line anyway, could be traced back to David. Ruth was an instrumental figure in bringing us Jesus. Guys, God works all things for good. If there's anything I want you to take away from the story of Ruth, it's this. God works all things for good. Look at where Ruth started versus where she ends up. I can't imagine going through the kind of agony and pain and difficulty that Ruth went through. You have Naomi and Elimelech moving to Moab, their sons marrying Ruth and Orpah. Then all the husbands die. Elimelech dies, Ruth's husband dies, Orpah's husband dies. Naomi takes Ruth back to Israel because Orpah doesn't want to go with them. Orpah stays in Moab. Ruth and Naomi get back to Israel. They have land to live on for now, but it won't last, and it won't stay in the family. When Naomi dies, Ruth won't have it. Ruth will be a beggar, essentially. She will be on the streets. But then Ruth meets Boaz, the owner of this massive field of barley and grain, and like she is able to follow behind his workers and pick the grain. Boaz sees this, lets her stay and work for him. And this relationship turns out to be a huge blessing because it turns out Boaz is related to Naomi, so he can become the family redeemer. Ruth goes, begs him to become their family redeemer, begs for his help. He not only gives it, he goes through it in a legal, public way to make sure the world knows what is being done for Ruth. Guys, if I were Ruth at the beginning of this story, I would feel absolutely hopeless. And there are some people today, some of you watching this maybe, who are going through a time period not unlike Ruth's. You may be going through a period of your life where you're saying, nothing is going my way. I've lost too much. I'm gaining too little. I have nothing to show for anything. God has abandoned me. You may end up just like Naomi at the beginning, who was so bitter and so angry at God. She said, don't call me Naomi, which means pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter, because I am bitter at the Lord. You may be at Naomi's point right now. You may be in Ruth's point. You found a way to keep yourself going, but it's hard work and difficult. You may be, going behind the workers picking the grain. You may be having a difficult time in life and not seeing a lot of hope in your future. You're just clinging on to every moment, hoping things change. But I got news for you guys. God is going to work something amazing through you. You may not see what it is. You may not recognize it. You may not understand the plan God has for you specifically, but I guarantee you He's got one. It may take time, patience, faith, but He's got one. The story of Ruth is a story of God's love, His grace, and His redemption. Boaz and Ruth's story not only mirrors the story of us and Jesus Christ, but it also shows us that God's plans are absolute and God has a will and destiny for us. Because Boaz and Ruth, they could not have known, could they, that in just 2 generations after them, along would come the King David. And they definitely couldn't have known that many, many, many generations after David would come Jesus. And it all started with what many people just think is a simple love story. Crazy, right? It's funny. I'll tell you this and then we'll wrap up for the day. I heard this one pastor one time, and I greatly disagree with what he said. He said, we should just forget about the Old Testament, The Old Testament isn't relevant. The New Testament is all that matters. We should just do away with the Old Testament. When I read through Ruth, I laugh at that. because I've learned so much just from reading this passage, from reading this book. And that goes with all the Old Testament. The Apostle Paul says that all Scripture is God-breathed and useful for teaching, rebuking, and educating. All Scripture is God-breathed. Jesus says, I did not come to destroy the law of Moses, but to fulfill it. He did not come to destroy the Old Testament. He's fulfilling it. There is not one verse in the New Testament that says that anything in the Old Testament should be discounted or not learned from. Ruth is something we can learn from. And that is why I think that despite it being a small book, despite it being a simple love story to many, it is so much more valuable than that. What did you guys think of the story of Ruth? Let me know down in the comment section below what you took from this, what you liked about this story, what it meant to you, how much it impacted you. Let me know if you thought it was worth learning. Thank you guys so much for following along. Hopefully next Sunday we'll be ready to start a new Bible study. It depends. I got to do some reading. Let me know what you guys would like to hear next as well. Like, what would you like to study next or dive into? Would love to hear your thoughts and input. And as always, guys, I will see you in my next video. Take care.